Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about vertebrates, and this is part one. There are about 58,000 species of vertebrates, so we're going to talk about some characteristics and some major groupings today. Now, your chordates, they're in the phylum Chordata, and there are four big characteristics of these chordates that's important to keep in mind, and all the vertebrates fit into the phylum Chordata. The first one, the notochord, that is a supporting rod in the dorsal area or the posterior area of a vertebrate, and it's located just below the nerve cord towards the back. And vertebrates have kind of an embryonic notochord that's replaced by a spine or a vertebral column during development. Now, a dorsal tubular nerve cord, that's also known as the spinal cord, and basically it's just a cord that contains a canal that's filled with fluid and nerves, and all vertebrates have that too. It's just the spinal cord. Pharyngeal pouches. Pharyngeal pouches, mostly vertebrates have them only during embryonic development. Sometimes these pouches form into gills. For non-vertebrate chordates that we'll talk about in a second. Also, fish, amphibian larvae, their pouches form into gills eventually. Terrestrial vertebrates that have lungs have pouches for specific purposes. For instance, humans, their first pair of pharyngeal pouches form their auditory tubes, which go to the ears. Their second pair of pouches form the tonsils. The third pair form the thymus, which it helps make T cells, and that's real important for development. It's right above your heart. Okay, and then the fourth pair of pharyngeal pouches, they form your parathyroids, and your parathyroids are located just behind your thyroid gland, and your parathyroids help regulate the body's calcium levels, and they're also important for muscle contraction and conduction of electrical currents along the nerves. Okay, so pharyngeal pouches are real important for development. And then finally, the post-anal tail, we have our tailbone or our coccyx. Basically, the post-anal tail extends beyond the anus. Okay, really, vertebrates have that too. Okay, ours, of course, is just our coccyx, real tiny. Now, trends among the chordates: you can have invertebrate chordates, and the only two invertebrates that fit into Chordata phylum are the tunicates and the lancelets, and we'll look at pictures of them in just a second. And then you've got all the vertebrate chordates: fish, amphibians, birds, reptiles, mammals. Now, cartilaginous fish, they were the very first to develop jaws, and some early bony fish, they started to have lungs, and eventually vertebrates went from being all in the water really until they started to go on land. And amphibians were really the first to kind of start being part-time land animals. And then reptiles, birds, and mammals really live a lot of the time on land. Okay, and they adapted both their appearance and their outer coverings and the way they reproduce to live on land pretty much all the time. Now, here are the major groups of chordates. We've got the tunicates and the lancelets down at the very bottom. They are considered to be invertebrates. They do not have a vertebrae, but they have several of the other characteristics of chordates, so they are classified as chordata. And then you've got all your fish, okay, different varieties, and then you've got amphibians, and then reptiles, and then birds fit into the reptiles also, and then mammals. Okay, so we'll be going through these kind of one at a time. Now, non-vertebrate chordates, the first ones are tunicates, and tunicates are also known as sea squirts, and there are about 1,250 species of tunicates. Okay, and the only chordate characteristic remaining in the adults are really the gill slits, so you know. Basically, they are filter feeders. They just bring water through themselves and then filter out the food that they need. The larva is bilaterally symmetrical. It's got all four chordate characteristics, but as adults, they just have a pharynx, okay, and some gill slits. Okay. Now, they just basically beat cilia through the pharynx, and that creates water current, and then microscopic particles are going to stick to the mucus that's on the inside, and then they'll digest their food. And this is what they look like. Basically, they kind of look like a really big whoopee cushion, and the water just goes through the in-current siphon and then out the ex-current siphon. And then the other non-vertebrate chordate are the lancelets. And lancelets, to me, look kind of like little fish. There's actually 30 species of those. They live in shallow, rocky coastal waters. They're not very large, just a few centimeters long. And they keep all 4 chordate characteristics as an adult. Okay? And you can see segmentation on them. They do have a nerve cord. Okay? They don't really have a brain per se, but they do have a nerve cord. And they've got some muscles. And this is what lancelets look like. If you were to look at these, you might think they were just little fish, but they tend to live in rocky, kind of coastal saltwater areas. And this is what they look like on their insides. Okay, they have a notochord, they have a dorsal tubular nerve cord, so they've got the beginnings of a spine, although they really don't have a full-blown vertebrae. They have a nerve cord which resembles our spinal cord. They've got some pharynx, okay. They've got some gill bars or gill slits, okay, which come from the pharyngeal pouches, and then they've got an anus and then a post-anal tail also. Now, vertebrate characteristics are really important to know. All vertebrates have 4 chordate characteristics at some point in their lives. Distinguishing features: they have a notochord that's replaced by a vertebral column or a spine. They have a strong endoskeleton, okay, 2 pairs of appendages usually. They have a closed circulatory system, and what that means is that blood is contained entirely within blood vessels. So the blood just doesn't flow through like it does in some insects and some other invertebrates. Basically, they've got blood vessels, and the blood stays in the blood vessels. They have a high degree of cephalization. You can almost always tell where the head is on a vertebrate. Cephalization just means that there's usually eyes, there's usually some kind of brain, okay, and there's usually like a head region. They do have jaws a lot of the time. They have very efficient respiration and excretion. Most vertebrates have really good kidneys that are important for excretion, water regulation, and they can get oxygen from either the water or the air, whatever's appropriate for them. They have complex sense organs, and the eyes develop as an outgrowth of the brain. Okay. And a lot of vertebrates have a skull that actually protects that brain. Now, some vertebrate evolution that's important to remember. Jaws allowed for big fish, like sharks, to eat more food, and as they ate more food, they probably, over millions of years, started to evolve. They ended up being, really near the top of the food chain in the ocean. Okay. Also, limbs allowed for locomotion and the eventual movement from water to land for a lot of these amphibians like salamanders. And then shelled eggs, and then amniotic fluid, which provides nutrients and holds the wastes for a lot of reptiles, and then some mammals also. It allowed for reproduction on land as well. Now, let's talk about fish for a little while. There are 3 groups of fish. You can have jawless fish, you can have cartilaginous bony fish. Basically, jawless fish obviously don't have jaws, and bony fish, they tend to have teeth. Okay, and jaws allow for a very carnivorous, predatory way of life. They can eat lots of meat. Okay. They are adapted to life in the water. They fertilize and release their sperm and eggs into the water, and then the zygotes will develop later on. Okay. Now, jawless fishes, a hagfish. Hagfish, they're kind of ugly creatures, honestly. They are scavengers, okay, and hagfish are a very ancient group of fish. They possess a skull, but they don't have the vertebrate that's found in other classes of vertebrates, and they eat mainly dead fish, okay, and they're sort of bottom dwellers a little bit. And then lampreys, they have a true vertebral column. A lot of them are parasites. They use their round mouth kind of as a sucker to attach themselves to other fish and tap into the circulatory system. Okay. Quite a few species of the hagfish and lampreys. Hagfish tend to be scavengers. Lampreys tend to be, parasitic. I'll put some video clips on this unit, so make sure you take a look at those. Okay. Then cartilaginous fish. Those have obviously lots of cartilage, and those are sharks, skates, rays. Skates are kind of like stingrays. They do not have a stinging spine, though. So skates don't have a spine. They have a real thick, compact tail. They like cold, deep water. They're have kind of drab coloring and all. But they're a lot like stingrays. But stingrays, they actually do have a stinging spine. They have a long, slender tail. And rays tend to like warmer seas and rivers. And they have a lot bolder coloring. Just to show you tell you the difference there. Now, cartilaginous fish have 3 really well-developed senses. The first one, they're able to sense electrical currents in the water. And so, basically, they're able to sense where prey is and then be able to go find it. Okay. They have a lateral line system, and a lateral line system, that's a series of pressure-sensitive cells along both sides of the body, okay, of these cartilaginous fish. And the lateral line system senses pressure caused by nearby movements in the water. So if there's schools of fish and it's feeding time, the cartilaginous fish have that lateral line system that can detect pressure changes in the water, and they're able to go get their food quickly. And then they have a very keen sense of smell. As you know, sharks can detect some scents from about 1/3 of a mile away from in the open ocean, and they can smell blood very well, and they're able to kind of overwhelm their prey and eat them. And here is a stingray right here. It's got really pretty coloring there. Okay, there's its eye, its fins. Now, bony fish. Bony fish are a lot of what we eat, what we fish, for in like Lake Wright-Patman and so forth. Bony fish, most are ray-finned. They have paired fins, and they have a swim bladder for buoyancy. Now, this swim bladder, that allows fish to change their density, which allows them to go up or down in the water. Okay, so the swim bladder basically can secrete gases into it or absorb gases from the bladder, and that will help fish kind of go up and down in the water. Okay. Bony fish include, salmon, lungfish, lizardfish, eels, catfish, cod, trout, salmon, haddock, and so forth. Some of them tend to be filter feeders, like herring. Some of them tend to be carnivores, like piranhas or barracudas. Some basically kind of eat what's there, what's available to them, like trout. Okay. And they use gills. Okay, as the water passes through their gills, the oxygen's absorbed, carbon dioxide's given off. Okay. And their blood is pumped by a 2-chambered heart, that's important to know, through a single circulatory system. So the blood just kind of goes around one, long loop. And here's a bony fish right here, and they actually have, gallbladder and liver and a heart and all of that. Okay, the kidneys tend to be back there. Okay, there you are. You may not see too much of this, particularly if you've never cleaned a fish before after you've gotten them out of the river. Okay, but that's what it looks like. Now, there's its fins right there. Okay, there's the gills. Okay. Now, bony fish, a lot of those are kind of ray-finned or lobe-finned fishes. Eventually, they think that they evolved into, the amphibians. They think, basically, the fleshy kind of appendages, they might be adapted for locomotion on land. Okay, and I never say this right, coelacanths, they were thought to have gone extinct about 20,000 years ago, although some of them have actually turned up, like in Indonesia and off the coast of eastern Africa. Okay, so bony fish, eventually they think some of them evolved into the amphibians. Now, amphibians. Amphibians include salamanders, frogs, newts, toads. Okay, there are about 6,000 species of amphibians. They have four jointed appendages. They have moist eyelids. Okay, and their eyelids keep their eyes moist, that is. They have really good ears for picking up sound waves, and they have larynx for vocalization, particularly like during mating season. Now, amphibians, they have a larger brain than a fish. They're considered to be a little more intelligent. They have really small lungs, and they have gas exchange that also occurs across their skin. Okay. They have a three-chambered heart, unlike fish that have a two-chambered heart. And three-chambered heart, they have two atria and one ventricle. Okay. So, it has a divided atrium, but only one single ventricle. And the right atrium tends to get deoxygenated blood from the body, and the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs. Okay, so the two types of blood, they're going to be partially mixed in the single ventricle. And then mixed blood is sent to all parts of the body. Okay, and some of it's going to be sent to the skin where it gets further oxygenated. So amphibians, they don't have to completely clean up their blood and keep the deoxygenated blood and the oxygenated blood all separated like we do. The reason is because amphibians also breathe through their skin. So if their blood gets mixed up, that is the oxygenated and the deoxygenated, it's not really a big deal because they also breathe through their skin and have gas exchange that way. It's not just through the blood vessels and the capillaries where we have gas exchange and in the lungs. Okay, if that makes sense. Now, amphibious life, they tend to be in the water when they're very young, and they tend to be adults on land, but they need to live near a water source usually. A lot of amphibians, particularly like frogs, they need to live near a water source so that they don't dry out. And reproduction generally occurs in the water. Now, here's just life cycle of frogs. You have tadpoles that hatch, and then tadpoles are going to respire with gills. They kind of look like little fish. And then kind of a young frog, it'll still have its tail. And then eventually, when the frog is fully grown, then it will lose its tail and it will respire with lungs. Okay, so it will hop in the water in and out, but it lives a lot on land too. Now, adults usually return to the water to reproduce. Okay. And you should know over 40% of all amphibian species are threatened with extinction. And because of their permeable skin and a life cycle that depends on both water and land, they're thought to be really an indicator species of environmental quality. And basically what that means is that wildlife biologists, if they notice that lots and lots of frogs are dying, then that sends up a red flag that there's probably going to be either pollution on land, like chemical dumping, acid rain, either on land or in the water. Okay. And so frogs are really thought to be the first to respond to environmental degradation. Okay. And so disappearances of frogs populations tend to really concern a lot of biologists. So they know that there's something very bad wrong either with the land or the water or both. Okay, if you've got lots of frogs, dying off in a certain area.